With some of the most recent footage of Final Fantasy XVI being shown at PAX East last weekend, as well as some of the developers' comments about this game being compared to previous games in the Final Fantasy series, I just wanted to give some of my thoughts on the newest game's direction, as well as my general thoughts about the future of turn-based RPGs overall. If you've been watching my channel, you'll know that I've had a pretty much a lukewarm viewpoint about the newest upcoming Final Fantasy game, the 16th entry in the series, which is pretty sad, as this is my favorite video game series of all time. Combat-wise, the essential gameplay loop of Final Fantasy XVI is something akin to a Devil May Cry game. And this shouldn't really be a surprise. Devil May Cry 5 and Final Fantasy XVI have the same combat director, Ryota Suzuki. And this makes me think that if I wanted to play a DMC game, I'd do that. But I'm not here for that. I'm here for a Final Fantasy game. Also featured in 16 are extremely large kaiju-type battles against icons like Ifrit and Phoenix. And honestly, I've also not been impressed as well. It's like they're all flesh and no substance. And everything that I've just said is totally biased on previous experience that I've had with the Final Fantasy series, and I'm totally ready to change my mind here. If there's anything that a Final Fantasy game has done for me in the past, it's changed my mind. And Final Fantasy XIV, A Realm Reborn, was able to do that for me with the MMORPG genre. And I'd argue that this entry, which is the 14th one, is probably one of the best in the overall series of Final Fantasy and in the MMO genre to date. And I mention the 14th entry because the Final Fantasy XVI producer is Naoki Yoshida. He also produced and directed Final Fantasy XIV, A Realm Reborn. Yoshida made some interesting comments lately about the Final Fantasy series. He stated, traveling around the world, speaking with fans and media about their image of the franchise, they would always give the same answer, that it's turn-based, that it's anime-like. These teenagers saving the world, very JRPG. This was the image for all Final Fantasy. This was turning off some players because they thought it could only be that, and that was a reason not to get into it. Based on this, it looks like Yoshida is hoping to expand the overall reach of Final Fantasy XVI beyond its hardcore fans like myself. And based on the footage from the story and the worlds, and especially its overall more mature look and feel, the developers are looking to expand its player base to a much wider audience. And this includes younger gamers who may not be as familiar with older turn-based entries. To this effect, Yoshida had stated, younger gamers grew up playing first-person shooters. They grew up playing games like Grand Theft Auto, where basically you press a button and something happens immediately. This sounds like a statement stereotyping younger gamers and fitting them into a single box, one that obviously assumes that all younger gamers don't like, haven't played, or aren't interested in turn-based gaming. The reality is that Final Fantasy XVI, being an action-based game and not a turn-based one, was a decision that was mostly based in marketing. SquareEnix hopes to sell over 10 million copies of Final Fantasy XVI. They feel they cannot do this with a turn-based game. And honestly, I feel they're right to feel this way with the properties they currently have on hand. If we look at most recent turn-based games released by SquareEnix, like Bravely Default 2, Octopath Traveler, and Live Alive, each of these have sold anywhere in the ballpark of 1 to 3 million copies. While nothing compared to what Square Enix expects Final Fantasy XVI to sell, these low millions are actually great, based on the production budget for these low model or HD 2D entries. Nothing compared to the triple-digit million budget that a game like Final Fantasy XVI would have. Now, older turn-based games like Final Fantasy VI have totaled roughly 5 million units sold over its many iterations. So does that mean that turn-based games are dying and can't sell? If I were to say yes, I'd be dead wrong. Any Pokemon fan like Jason the 13th will tell you that. After all, mainline Pokemon games often sell ridiculous amounts of copies. Regardless of controversy, quality or condition upon sale. I've actually seen people argue that these games are in a genre of their own and shouldn't be solely classified as turn-based RPGs. Other games with this type of gameplay loop, like Shin Megami Tensei 5, Dragon Quest 5, or even Suikoden, are turn-based RPGs, but still feature recruiting monsters and others to be part of the player's party. These two have sold well, though, of course, nothing like the 20 million units that Pokemon Scarlet and Violet did in its first month and a half of sales. So based on all of this, turn-based RPGs are alive and well with a bright future ahead of them. There will be more games like Octopath Traveler coming thanks to Team Asano's effort to continue the HD 2D train. Even Konami is getting on this train with the remastering of Suikodens 1 and 2. With how much money Nintendo and the Pokemon Company made with Scarlet and Violet, it's a surety that more Pokemon games are coming too. SquareEnix has shown love to the first 6 games in the Final Fantasy series that had turn-based gameplay with the Pixel remasters, though it begs the question if future games in the Final Fantasy series will have this. Again, not offshoots or anything like Final Fantasy Dimensions. Honestly, I'll play these newer Final Fantasy games regardless if it'll be turn-based or not, but if I want this series to continue, I'll want the games to sell well. Square Enix believes action-based gameplay will sell better, games like Pokemon be damned. And yes, I know turn-based gameplay isn't the definitive reason that Pokemon sells, but if the Pokemon Company could do it with turn-based gameplay, why can't Square Enix? To that end, let me know your thoughts on this topic in the comments section below. Do you think turn-based RPGs are like a relic of the past and don't have a future in the video game world? What would Square Enix need to do to sell the numbers of a Pokemon game if it were turn-based? Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed what you saw, please like, subscribe, and ring that bell for notifications. Thanks to my huge backlog that I mentioned in one of my last videos, even if the turn-based RPG faucet were to suddenly turn off, I'd still have enough of these games to play up until I died.